His modest goal? To discover the permit status of the 120 billboards jammed along one of LA's ugliest streets, Lincoln Boulevard, between Marina del Rey and Santa Monica. After spending 6 hours wading through microfiche at the Department of Building and Safety offices on Figueroa Street and finding just 2 permits on Lincoln, Hathaway gave up. Quote, there are cases in which billboard appears to be at one address and there's no permit listed for that address. But for a nearby address which doesn't appear to have any billboard, Hathaway says. Outraged by the closed-door settlement and years of apathy from building and safety, Boss Edelman and the city council, Wu, Silver, Hathaway formed the coalition to ban billboard blight in 2006. Their goal was to raise money to challenge the settlements that are ushering in digital billboards and grandfathering in an unknown number of illegal pre-1986 billboards. They filed a lawsuit last year but lost when the judge ruled that, quote, residents of the city don't have an economic interest, end quote, says Wu, frowning at the memory. Quote, all of those formal filings cost us almost $15,000. It is a situation that you need a lot of money to fight. Our enemy has very deep pockets, so they can go on forever, end quote, Wu said. The settlements required very, very little of the billboard owners. They were just supposed to hand over a long list, the addresses of their legal and illegal billboards, and other minor concessions. But the city council soon learned that Clear Channel and CBS Outdoor were insisting on keeping the inventory list out of the public's hands, claiming the sign locations were a trade secret. Gruhl and Weiss were peeved over such arrogance from big firms that had just received $1 billion windfall from City Hall in the form of digital billboard approvals. So, led by Weiss and Gruhl, the council declared in January 2007 that the list was not a trade secret. But again, the city was at odds with itself. The next month, Deputy Attorney Steve Ball assured the billboard companies that building and safety did not have a database in which the billboard owners' names could be searched, and that there were no plans to create a usable system. Quote, it was the worst settlement agreement I have seen in my entire life, end quote, says First Amendment and Land Use Attorney Bill Brenton, who led the settlement effort for Jacksonville and more than a dozen cities. While Council President Garcetti and others brag about getting a paltry 98 of the 11,000 billboards removed, Jacksonville had, quote, more than 1,000 billboards removed, end quote, recalls Brenton. We hung tough. I think Jacksonville is a far more beautiful city because we got a handle on the billboard problem 20 years ago. We didn't make the types of mistakes Los Angeles did. We didn't take what they offered, end quote. Handing Clear Channel, CBS, and Regency a lucrative digital signage deal, quote, seemed to violate every basic rule on reaching agreements with the industry, end quote, Brenton says. Los Angeles granted them, quote, rights beyond their wildest dreams, which they couldn't even get through the legislation. Quote, it is really incredible what happened, end quote. Brenton thinks the 15-year member city council hurriedly embraced the deal without bothering to understand those details, listening instead to Delgadillo, who he says was too quick to hand goodies to the firms. Quote, I wonder if Rocky really understands the consequences, end quote. I think he does. Back to the article. Brenton says critics like Wu and Silver are now realizing, quote, we are losing everything we fought so hard for 20 years ago, end quote. His prediction, quote, every time a billboard gets upgraded to a digital ad, it will create controversy, end quote. Last year, Weiss called the deal to hold your nose agreement, but Council President Garcetti took the opposite tack, criticizing the media for beating up on the idea of a settlement. Deputy Attorney Ball had promised council members of the inspection program would result in the immediate removal of a large number of billboards and creation of the list. That, it turns out, was just more talk. Quote, I thought that was as likely to happen as the sun rising in the west, end quote, chuckles Hathaway. Quote, they cook up deals out of the public eye. Half of the time it is too late and there's a big problem. The billboard problem is about how the city does business, end quote. After the settlement deals, there were allowed by Villaraigosa, record shows building and safety bureaucrats told Clear Channel and CBS that they had no intention of quickly starting up the promised billboard inspections. Sighing, Weiss says, quote, "It sure seems to me that it can be up and running today." The building and safety bureaucracy, led by General Manager Adelman, instead appears to be digging in its heels against the promised crackdown. In a weird two-page report sent to Weiss in December and again in February, Adelman claims that due to various litigation actions, the inspections and fees never got off the ground. The strange thing is, nothing in the courts prevents the city from collecting its fees. CBS spokesman Ryan Brooks, who denies the company owns illegal billboards, says, "We haven't done anything to prevent them from starting," end quote, a claim that Clear Channel echoes. After a dozen calls by the Weekly to building and safety spokesman Robert Steinbach, the rep deemed the mystery, replying by email, deepened the mystery, sorry about that. Quote, "There are current lawsuits which challenge various aspects of the inspection program and associated fees," end quote. Despite his double talk, there is nothing stopping the bureaucrats from at long last getting to the bottom of the billboard industry regulation inventory. Except the bureaucrats. Delgadillo's office says that today no litigation stands in the way. In court, papers filed last month, representatives from Clear Channel and CBS report that they have never even been asked by the city to pay the fees. In what some critics say is a case of Stockholm Syndrome, the Building and Safety Department, which failed to prevent a prominent illegal billboard from being erected last November in view of their own offices, behaves like an adjunct of the very companies that cowed them for years. In fact, the documents obtained by the Weekly, CBS outdoor consultant Andrew Goodman said he had delivered a box of permits to building inspectors Brad Neighbors, who, Goodman stated, quote, "told me that he would not share the information with anyone else," end quote. Yet, it is public information. Quote, "As bad as the settlement was, the implementation of it is totally one-sided," end quote, says activist Hathaway. Quote, "The billboard companies are going ahead with their, quote, digital entitlements," end quote. The fact that the 2007 billboard crackdown was stillborn did not come to light. Few members of the city council even knew of it until the Weekly sent a California Public Records request to Building and Safety a few weeks ago, asking for the list. Instead of providing it, building inspectors quickly alerted the billboard giants about the Weekly's interest. Tipped off by the city employees, Clear Channel and CBS promptly sought an injunction to prevent the Weekly from getting the list. In a letter to the Weekly, an attorney representing the Clear Channel Outdoor and CBS Outdoor questioned the list's news value. Then, I'm sorry. These people are corrupt. Anyway, then perhaps under the misimpression that they are now part of the. Let me get back to this article. Then perhaps under the misimpression that they are now part of City Hall, the two corporations informed the Weekly that they wouldn't object to the city. The city released very, very broad public data, such as how many citizens' complaints were filed against all billboards in 2007. Pissed off that building department's officials and Delgadillo's office as well had alerted the two corporations of the newspaper's request for public information a month ago, Weiss and Gruhl asked Delgadillo why the list, ordered by the council more than a year ago, had not been produced. Quote, "They can't do enforcement if they don't have the inventory list," end quote, howls Scenic Houston's Lloyd. Quote, "It is standard operating procedure for a city to ask a billboard company to file the inventory every year. It's not a shocking requirement," end quote. Lloyd erupts in laughter over the absurdity of the excuses given and accepted within Los Angeles City Hall. Hoots Lloyd, quote, "It is an asset of the company," end quote. Philadelphia posts its billboard list on its city website, city website www.phila.gov. The city's society created to reduce urban blight, or scrub, urbanlight.org, goes further, offering a billboard finder that highlights in red all unlicensed billboards. The Florida Department of Transportation maintains an outdoor advertising database. Of the 17,000 billboards along its federal and state roadways, the database, updated monthly, provides the addresses, owner, height, number of faces, and permit status, plus a recent photo. It has turned out, quote, it has turned out to pay dividends for us, end quote, says John Garner of the Florida Department of Transportation. If billboard firms know that we have in the database, it reduces litigation and collection time. So, if I'm not mistaken, they just said that Florida has 17,000 billboards along its federal and state roadways. It's basically, if I'm not mistaken, all of Florida. Whereas the single city of Los Angeles has 11,000. My goodness. Wow. Anyway, in a landslide vote in 2002, San Francisco citizens approved Proposition G to ban all new billboards and required the companies to hand over their inventory lists.